Intraday peak of $2,584 for 1 ounce of gold. Just another Friday. Well, that puts us well into new all-time high territory and gets us on the hunt for $3,000 gold. We're going to look at some of those factors, help us figure out when we get there, and at least open up the question of where we go from there. Okay, here we are. 1 week out from the Fed's September policy meeting. This is a meeting that traders are 100% certain will result in the first rate cut since the hike in March of 2022. Now, I kind of hate to tie gold's value simply to its price, and its price to something so simple as Fed policy, but we all see what it's doing right now, and it's due to the pivot that we've all been hearing about for nearly 2 years now. If you're able to look past the crazy run we're in right now thinking, hey, this pivot doesn't really matter, well, I can show you what happened the last time the Fed changed its rate policy, and it's kind of a big deal. But first, let's get a quick shout out to Summit Metals. You've seen me mention their flash sales on gold and silver. Well, there's more to them than that. They've got great prices and fast shipping all around, so get in there and check them out. SummitMetals.com. Okay, so I heard you like charts, so let's take a look. Now, we could go back to the rate cuts beginning in September of 2008. That would be the obvious comparison. We could look at the run that happened the next 3 years, but let's not be obvious. Let's look at a chart of gold performance over the past 5 years. Now, what we see here is gold price running from $1,450 all the way to gold trading above $2,580. And there's a lot going on in this time frame, including a global pandemic, but let's dial into March of 2022. This is when the Fed increased the interest rate for the first time since 2018. So we're looking at the opposite of what's about to happen. Now, rate increases continued through July of 2023, and we can't say that that's all that was influencing gold price at the time, but it was a huge variable. And we can at least agree that the rally died out in this time frame despite record gold buying from central banks. Now, let's get to December of 2023. We started hearing about a rate cut. We also started to understand just how much gold central banks were buying. Rally takes off again. Now, if we look at the price increase since February of this year, talk of a rate cut became any day now. And in June, we learned China had paused its gold buying, so anticipation of these cuts and the expected impact on the dollar and treasury yields has really been the big story in gold's price rally over the last 5 months. So now we know what the rate increase did. We know what the hope of a rate cut has done, and next week we get the big show with the actual beginning of the Fed policy pivot and everything that goes along with it. Now, I had a conversation with somebody about 1.5 years ago who said a Fed policy pivot would push gold above $3,000. And that's going to seem really obvious today, but gold at the time was trading right around $1,850. And we didn't know central banks were about to go on a gold buying spree, so $3,000, that would have felt like a moonshot, depending on your definition. That is a 62% delta. The only part that I called into question was the timing. Of course, we're going to get to $3,000 eventually, but I mentioned that I would expect to see a leg up to $2,350 to $2,550 by Q3 or Q4 of 2024. That was just a $500 to $700 gain at the time, and the guest said, yeah, that's going to happen, but that's just the start. Those are rookie numbers. And if we were to go back to the rate cuts from 2008 and see what happened leading up to 2011, well, that might be evidence for what he was saying. Now, if you were to go back to the chart, but I'll spare you, we can see we got to the 30 to 40% gain that my guest and I both thought was the feasible next leg, that $500 to $700 gain. We got there by April of this year, 4 to 5 months before we even got to an actual pivot. Now, again, that was 1.5 years ago. Neither of us could have known, but the catalyst that he gave was going to be an actual rate cut. And here we are at the top of that range the week before it actually happens. So I guess the question now is, when do we hit $3,000 and where does it go from there? Now, like I said, that's only a matter of time. I'm sure everyone will hold some variation of that opinion. It's a pretty easy guess we'll be above $3,000 for gold 10 years from now. It's harder to say we'll get there in the next 14 months. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, one of the more interesting bits of analysis suggests the pivot rally is already priced in, and we might actually see a buy the rumor, sell the news situation. Now, look, I'm not there, but I think it's an easy assumption that some amount of the policy pivot has already been priced in. We can see that, it's clear, and that's probably why that theory even seems feasible. When you base a broad theory off a narrow fact, it gets past that no way reflex. Well, we get to test that theory and see how much has been priced in next week, beginning on the 18th. So if you've been holding out for a drop in gold price, just waiting to make those purchases, well, this is a big week, and I'd say that it might be a bad week to be holding out for a dip, but I've been wrong before. We get some actual data to test those theories next week, though, and it's going to tell us a lot, like what a moonshot for gold might actually look like. Now, I've had people say $3,000, $3,500 by the end of 2025, and who knows from there. The part that nobody seems to be speculating on, though, is a correction or a pullback. And even though I'm in the $2,600 and beyond camp, we might see some of that volatility that we have people warning us of. I would say today, the only crazy prediction would be the one that doesn't consider some downs with all of these ups. So there were a few debates in all this, and I've been giving both sides of them, at least to the extent both arguments are at least feasible. One is whether the price of gold goes up or down on the actual news at the pivot. Now, I'll be really clear here. I say the price of gold goes up. I think that's obvious. Well, the only reason I wouldn't say that with 100% certainty is we don't know how excited the markets will get leading up to that cut. What we do know is there is not a single trader out there who isn't expecting a rate cut next week, so a lot of it's being priced in. Well, personally, I'm a fan of volatility, and I'm hoping we get some sell the news moments just to continue getting a few fun buying points in, but I don't even know what kind of news would be able to kill the rally. It would have to be something big. Now, the other is how quickly we break through that 25.91 level. That's showing up in technical analysis. But we've already gotten within a few dollars of that just in intraday trading, so maybe we need to start looking at $2,600 as that next psychological barrier. And maybe none of this is enough. Maybe, like we said earlier, these might just be rookie numbers. So let's get into the big one. When do we hit $3,000? Well, in the spirit of hoping to be proven wrong, I think we could see gold price well into the 2600s and peaking into the 2700s this year. But I wouldn't expect $3,000 to hit until 2025. Now, I can come up with a lot of cases that would get us there, but it just isn't the likely case. Now, if you just play out the numbers of what it would take to get there to $3,000, that'd be a 20% gain on top of where we're at right now. Now, we're up 24% so far this year, and that's a big run already, but I wouldn't be surprised by a 20% run on top of that in the next 15 months. Now, maybe you're saying, hey, 15 months is a long time. It's going to happen in 3. Well, that wouldn't factor in any potential downside, any corrections, and we know by now that corrections tend to be a part of any run. So looking conservatively, 10% would put us at 2750 next year. And if we update our numbers, because we were on a run today, I guess it's more like 2825. So that's the range that I have in mind. 2750 being the low, something right over $3,000 being the 2025 high. That's the range I have in mind. But none of this considers new events. I'm just looking at the numbers and the visible factors in front of us today, updating the view based on the hill we're currently on. Now, you see a run like we saw today, though, and things always look a little bit different. Optimism tends to take over. The important part is not to make any decisions based on my guesses that I'm throwing out, because they're just that. Now, if I do end up being wrong and you like to make fun of me, though, I'll be here. Let's call it good there. Don't sleep on summitmetals.com, by the way. They're a channel sponsor, so I'm biased, but that doesn't change the fact they're killing it for prices and on shipping speed. Just give them a shot if you're trying to get a purchase in before Powell puts the interest rate in reverse. I think they actually have some sales coming up this weekend also. Now, as for price predictions, let's see where you're at. Do you think we'll hit $3,000 gold in 2025? And where do you think we'll end 2024? Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, of course, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.